Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion in the Thousandfold Book Club of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. We have a four-part discussion coming at you here today. We are going to touch upon some dystopian themes, how they apply to our world, where it was, where it is, where it might be going, how others have seen similar themes, and what a prescription could be for a way forward, if there is one and it's not too late. We will find out. But first, let's get some introductions. My name is Sean. I'm the host of the Mythos and Logos World Mythology and Religions channel on YouTube, as well as podcast, wherever you like to listen. I cover stories from traditional cultures around the world, and I am joined here by three fantastic creators in their own right. First, representing 60-Second Philosophy, we have Matt.
Hi. Yep, my channel is 60-Second Philosophy. Basically short little clips of the concepts in philosophy. Started as an opportunity to teach people, mostly in college courses and stuff like that, and sort of evolved from there.
Awesome. We are also joined next, just going in screen order here, by KatiaPavlovart, a fantastic creator in her own right as well. Tell us a bit about your work, Katerina.
Hi, guys, and ladies, and whatever is watching, who is watching. I'm Ekaterina. I'm owner of channel KatiaPavlovart, and my channel is dedicated to Slavic mythology. I'm covering Slavic mythology, and I will introduce more of my original art projects later. And base core of my channel is based on Eastern European culture and just deep thinking and just implementing it into art and creating a discussion and media space for, my culture.
Wonderful. And then we are joined last but not least by who we can thank for putting this club together, X, the TheExNonGrata channel. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks again to Sean for leading this one. I talk a lot about anachronistic philosophers and writers who sort of try to contend with a modernity that they've never really found themselves to fit in. And I find a lot of their works inspiring, so I kind of want to put that out to the mainstream and have their works heard. And as you come to see later in the episode, we'll come across some of them as the discussion goes along, so I'm very excited for this episode.
All right, fantastic. That is definitely the idea of someone being out of their time or finding themselves in a modernity they do not recognize, I think, is very fitting for some of these dystopian works. Huxley's Brave New World included here. That could be compared to a lot of others, and I know, Matt, you had mentioned this is part of a marathon of different dystopias you've been through. What other worlds have you been to, and what stood out to you about Brave New World?
So, my job, my bread and butter, I run a landscaping business, lawn care, and so it gives me a lot of opportunities to burn through books quick because I'm just basically listening to books 24/7, as much as I can. So I was planning on writing a dystopian novel myself, and so I wanted to get a lay of the land and read some of the classics. And so I went kind of in order from, I think this is chronological, but I went from Brave New World, then 1984, and then I read Fahrenheit 451. That was kind of the first, section there. And I never really was interested in dystopian, kind of felt like kind of depressing, not my thing. But after reading these three, I think I came to understand that it's not just about kind of dour possibilities, what's going to happen, but it's a lot of insights on the things that we're prone to. That's a lot of literature is like that. You talk about mythology, that's almost all of it, right? Or ancient literature, a lot of that is just kind of not what is going to happen, but what always happens, the sorts of things that we encounter all the time.
Recurring patterns.
That's right. I've heard that actually someone, Leon Cass, who's a great writer, wrote that about the book of Genesis. Genesis, whether or not you believe it is what happened, it certainly becomes what always happens. And so we can look at ourselves when we're looking at a lot of these books as things that we're prone to as individuals and as societies, and not always things that are going to end in this terminal situation,
Right. So seeing where it goes wrong as a way to hopefully make changes before it's too late.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that is a good point to open it up as well, in terms of what, and this could be to anyone, what types of prescriptions we see Huxley making for his Brave New World, where we are today, what we find might have been on the nose, what maybe hasn't come to pass yet, but we should be careful to. Very interested to hear just in general impressions on this Brave New World that Huxley created.
Sure, I'll go. To answer your question right there, a great question, Ryan. It's sync. That fundamental question of what is the driving force that makes this dystopian novel is, when it all comes down to it, the prison of complacency. That's how I would frame it, right? And this prison of complacency is famously brought on through various psychological methods, namely the taking of drugs that is notably used throughout the book, especially, and this, I think this is very important, especially to sort of numb painful experiences, right? So we have, I think it was during the middle of the book where two of the characters, they had a very uncomfortable dialogue with each other. So one of them just instinctively takes soma, which is, I believe, the drug. And so what you get here is these citizens are engineered in a very mechanical sense to numb and satiate the mental state of all the people, to the point where their I guess their tolerance and threshold to face even awkward conversations, which, hey, who hasn't had that, right? We probably go through one every month. They can't even stand that, so they're so over medicated, if you will. And I think that's very important because in our world, right, there's this whole debate, especially online, about the everyone's heard about, whether it's true or not, it's everyone's heard of this, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but this idea that kids today are over medicated when they're just acting like kids, and then they're overdiagnosed as things like that. And I don't want to get into it whether that's an accurate take or not, but the important thing here, because that's missing the point, right? The important thing here is that it's prevalent enough for people to start talking and debating about it, and that in and of itself mirrors the situation at hand in the book. So that's what I would say personally.
It's an interesting point that's raised in that the drug of choice in the future world of Brave New World, soma. It's kind of the perfect drug in a way for what the ruling structure of that world needs in a people, right? It is euphoric with some hallucinogens, but also will calm one down. It's very interesting in that, clearly various drugs and medications, depending on who you ask, you'll probably have some falling under one category, one under another, really have been traditionally and today used in many different ways, whether that's for healing, whether that's for strange altered psychological experiences, right? But that here, the soma seems to be very much used as a controlling, even if it is a willing control, a willing submission to this pleasure, and the pleasure, distraction, positivity, all really, really serve this other purpose in Brave New World, I've found.
One thing that I thought might be worth discussing, this might broaden it out more than pertinent right now, but is just this idea of throughout the ages we've kind of asked this question, like, what is the end of man? What is our teleology? Like, what's the point, right? And a lot of people answer that question. A lot of philosophers answer that question in terms of happiness, right? The chief end of man is in some way related to happiness. And I think that that this book in itself kind of raises that, like, puts that into question, right? Like, we have a bunch of people who are ostensibly very happy, but looking on at these people, the reader says, oh wow, like, they're missing so many things that are sort of outside of like, they don't even realize that they're missing these important elements of humanity, and some of them are things that aren't happy. They're negative things, but like, they're still part of that life well lived, and so I do wonder, when you're talking about the drug, and when you're talking about there's a ton of other things in the book that kind of point towards that, how we can look at these people and feel sorry for them when, by all accounts, they're pretty happy.
Yes, very, very interesting. The value of, is happiness itself an end? It sounds like we got our tech issues sorted out, by the way.
Finally. I just, I was refreshing my memory, and I was rereading it because I did read this book a couple of years ago, and clearly remember the ending, because I'm not going to spoil anything, but the ending of this book is just so colorful, it just stays in your mind. I was just rereading, and I was just like, God damn, this is depressing. Yes, they are happy, but yes, they are not fulfilled. It's too different. You are not really fulfilled because you're not processing your emotions, and you're not facing it, or you're not processing or facing it, because if something comes and you just oh, I will just forgot about it, but you are not. Well, I already said you're not processing, of course. My point is that you have to find way to recycle it, face it, and yes, the good thing will come later. I mean, this is what I even do for my mental health when I face something, I would say, challenging or difficult, or something. I will say, oh gosh, this is so bad. It makes me feel uncomfortable and gross. First of all, you have to recognize that you feel uncomfortable and gross. Second of all, you process it, and then later you say, okay, it happened, you will get better, there is something better coming for you. You know what, this is bullshit, it's not good, but there is a huge luck coming to compensate all of that. So, and when you just take soma, you skipping step 1 and you erasing all other steps, and you are not able, and you're still going to feel empty after, because you just try to suppress it, and then you suppress it, and then you suppress it, and then you suppress it, and you will get to the boiling point anyway.
Right, there's a purpose to the discomfort.
I wouldn't say I don't want to just go at this point.
Oh, not necessarily a teleological purpose, or the meaning of life is in suffering. People have said that. More power to them. But I mean, even on a physical level, that if something is wrong, you feel uncomfortable. It seems to me, at least, that your body is telling you that something is wrong. And
you have to recognize it. You have to recognize it. You can, if you gaslighting it, and you gaslighting it at the point of until the rest of your life, you're going to suffer more. You just cannot gaslight that it's something uncomfortable, and because it's going to kick you back later anyway. No matter how much soma you take.
Right, and there's the soma, there is the And I'm curious in terms of what else, in terms of the distractions that are so common in the Brave New World. If we might see any echoes of that in our world now, where we maybe aren't taking the time to focus on things we should, or maybe ways we avoid that. I mean, not just to throw stones, but to also really question on that. I'm interested to hear thoughts in general.
I think the focus on sex is obviously a good comparison to, you know, whether or not you take it as a metaphor for just cheap thrills, or whether whether that's the real mechanism. I mean, the book is full of it. I wouldn't say it's graphic or explicit, but it's all over the place. I mean, I think it could be very easy to apply that to our time, whether it be with the prevalence of pornography or hookup culture or whatever you want to call it. I think that people are looking for real easy ways to get pleasure without paying for it, and I think that's the real rub in the book, is that nothing costs anything. Everything is real cheap, and when you don't pay for your emotions, you have them on credit, and you got to pay the bill eventually, right?
And it's fascinating too, as I was looking back at the timeline, um, as you had described, right? The relationship that this world has with sex as another distraction, as enforced free love, as a way to stop there from being bonds in society. Um, Huxley was writing before the invention of the pill, which is very forward looking in some ways. And when he, as I'd like to get to later, when he actually revisited this work later in his life, about 30 years after publishing, that was one of the biggest changes that he had mentioned, the sexual revolution. And it's very fascinating, and that something that seems like a freedom is is used as a tool of control in by the world state in Brave New World. I think that's very, very intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just has like this divide and conquer vibe, because if you don't form a big bond, you like very divided on like emotional and spiritual level, and you still going to feel isolated no matter how many connections you have.
And X, you had something as well, right?
I think, right, we can go down the list, right, of all those things that are put in place to systematically instill the sort of numbness of the spirit, right? So we've mentioned drugs, we've mentioned all the prevalence of casual sex and like that. But there's also, like, just from the get go, right? Uh, there's genetic engineering, right? Embryos are escorted along an assembly line, and the genetic engineering sort of manufactures and alters the human nature to sort of fit the the Brave New World. But what's really interesting here, and what I think, what you shouldn't miss, right, is we can talk about these specific factors that are put in place to sort of create this altered world. But the one thing keeping it all together is the system itself. It's the belief in the system, right? And that is why the I believe it was near the beginning of the book. The number one thing they first tried to instill was this was the compliance and support the uh, for the Brave New World. And so this is why not only does Brave New World create an environment without anything that might get in the way of happiness, it created an environment where the people tried to um, it created an environment where the people were made to sort of prioritize that kind of way of living above all else. And so it's not only about the dangers of, of overall happy society, but it's much more broadly about the dangers of conditioning in general, right? There's a lot of different philosophers that have tackled this problem, right? And filmmakers too. Like the one I think, Sean, you've know is hypernormalization, right? By Adam. Yeah, you see, I see your thumbs down
Oh
there.
yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
brilliant.
It's like I believe it was a 3 hour documentary. It's very great because it really takes like real life examples of modern history, and the gist of it is that you know there are these narratives created to sort of instill our satisfaction and complacency with the state of the world. So instead of trying to actually make our situation better in any substantial way, what's actually happening is instead of making the world better, they're just improving our perception of the world without actually changing the world. And that's kind of like the crux of the Brave New World, right? And so, um, I wrote in my notes here that upon reading the book, uh, readers tend to walk away aware of the hidden dangers in a seemingly perfect society. But what many of us don't realize, however, is that just as the characters in the novel were conditioned to view the world as utopia, we were very much conditioned in our world to view it as a dystopia. So we can say, yes, they live in a dystopian world. Oh no, how terrible. But the only thing that's preventing us from saying, wow, that is a great society, is the fact that we were conditioned differently. And so that's what I mean by the dangers of society. I'll end my point here, is that our beliefs, that our principles that we think that are so strong, it might just be a matter of how much conditioning we have, whether it's prescribed or just found there in the natural world. And so I think, yeah, so I think you can look at the specific issues of like, oh, this drug conditioning is bad. Oh, this embryo genetic engineering is bad. But the most important thing is the fact that we have the potential to sort of alter our opinions on whether it's good or bad in the first place through conditioning, and I think that's the key here.
Right, but that if we had been genetically engineered and through the Bokanovskification process, to try to remember the words there, and to have been so ingrained in this system where the system is above all, how we might not even have a vocabulary to question it. Just like we might not have a vocabulary or understanding, like Adam Curtis might say, because our world is so complex and we create these simplified narratives to try to understand it.
It's
Pardon.
actually and the story of Linda and how she got screwed by the system is just like, I'm revisiting the book now, and now I'm just like, I'm so sorry for you. So basically, she grew up in this utopian society, and she inherited one set of values, which is because she got like both experiences of both worlds, like with like one structure and with another structure, and then she ended up like in different like social environment, and she was basically completely like isolated by local community. And then she returned back, and then she is completely isolated by new community. And in contrast, her son, he's just like a wonder for them. It's just like entertainment and wonder, and everyone wants to be friends with him because he's interesting. But on a contrast, she is just like an inconvenience for everyone. It's just like, go have soma. We don't wanna communicate with you. Like, it's just. I mean, all this thing with completely gaslighting your emotion just completely kills any compassion. And yeah, and this is what happens to Linda if, like, yeah, it's just like, goddamn, like she came from another environment. Like, why did you even put like any effort to like, yeah, like, oh no, she just like, she has too many partners, but like, did you ever ask her why? Maybe just like no one really took an effort to communicate with her, and maybe just like because no one really took like with her, she didn't revalue anything like she came from, and like her son now has like a different perspective, and it's just like, and it just all comes back to gaslighting.
Right. The way that we try to, and I think this is along the lines of where you're going here, the way that we want to put blame on an individual despite them displaying symptoms of a social problem.
Yeah, it's just this case with Linda. Like, she ended up accidentally in this new environment. No one really communicated with her about it, and she didn't really have a chance to find out is it something I wanna do or I wanna not do or whatever. You just so she like really stuck and in what she believed. So when she came back and she ended up in her like so-called home environment, no one really needs her anymore, and no one really interested in her anymore because she's just an inconvenience for them now. Like, God,
right. She doesn't fit into the old system. She doesn't fit into the new system anymore because we have this very traditional world on the reservation, and the very new world that is our industrial society taken to the extreme, right? Because it's all based on after Ford, they cut the head off of the crosses to be a Model T, which I think is interesting because it's like heaven and earth, and then across relationships, but you're removing the heavenly aspect from that. So it's people and the earth in a way. Whether that's intentional symbolism or not, I'm not sure, but that this industrial society is what it's all based around. And when this woman goes into the traditional society on the reservation, she doesn't fit in because she's in that new world's morals, and she can't go back to the new world because she's an outsider to that. It's like the world that is so built upon this. I mean, one thing that Huxley says in his Brave New World Revisited that he wrote years later is that the society in Brave New World is like a computerized, systematized industrial society taken to its extreme. But humans are not like computers. We are not like the insects that are highly social animals. We have more in common with a kangaroo than we have with a computer, than we have with an assembly line. And really, if you look at historical human society, we're, for the vast majority of time frame, like in small tribal family units with very strong interpersonal relationships. And it seems like this figure who gets caught in between those two worlds is in a very tragic place. And it makes me think, whether it's in the book or in other dystopias, other fiction, our historical time we're in, or our reality, other figures who've been kind of at this place in between worlds, not fitting in either society. So I'm curious to open that up.
I think you'll find that in almost any dystopian book. I mean, I haven't read them all, but you'll find, because in order for someone to have dissonance with the society, like Bernard does, or in 1984, Winston or Guy in Fahrenheit 451, they have to realize something's off. And then once that happens, once one piece kind of falls away, then the whole kind of structure crumbles in their mind. And one of the things that I found very interesting about all the books that I've read is that a theme is the protagonist always talks to the big guy, whoever the big guy is, you know? So in this book, it's Mustafa Mond. And that conversation is really interesting. I'd love to talk about that. But then, they talk O'Brien in 1984, and I forgot the guy's name, the firefighter guy in Fahrenheit 451. But there's always this conversation where he's talking to this personification of the world. And I would say that out of the three that I just mentioned, in Brave New World is the most gracious, right? Mustafa Mond, you think he's going to come down and he's going to, give him the whip and send him away. But really, he's like, yeah, I get it. Like you guys are missing out on a lot of important things. He knows. He's got Shakespeare. He's got the Bible. He knows that there are elements of the life that these people are living are completely devoid of religion, art, literature, all this stuff that they don't have, and he gets it. And so when he decides to send the what was his name, Helmholtz, when he decides to just send him off, oh yeah, go to that island, you'll have fun there. Like, I think that's that's that dissonance. And in this book, they're kind of more friendly to it, whereas in 1984, they just kind of zap him to death and then make him shoot himself or kill him. I don't remember exactly how it works out, but I think
Make him love Big Brother.
yeah, exactly. As the bullet enters his brain. But I think one of the things that came to my mind really is Mond, right? He kind of feels sorry for these people, but he realizes, whether he's right or wrong, that before all this, right, there was a lot of pain. There's a lot of difficulty. Like, go back 100 years, and most people's lives are pretty crappy. And so he sees this trade-off, like, okay, everyone's life is going to be pretty trite. Everyone's life is going to be pretty empty, but they're going to be happy. They're going to go through their life with minimal difficulty, and then they're going to die. And that question is like, what's worth it? Is it worth dealing with all this bad stuff and having a human life, or not? And so Mond answers it one way, and I don't know. I don't know what Huxley is actually saying. I think he's probably not about it, but it's a good question. How does it work?
It's interesting with Bernard and Helmholtz, the islands, the nonconformists, that there is a place to set them aside, but it really is just another part in the system. That there are people who won't fit in this. Maybe something doesn't take with the conditioning, but just send them somewhere where they can't disturb what we have going on. It's sad in many ways that the world system is still so strong in that way, but makes you wonder if there is still that seed for change, that's something on the margins. With the Bible, Shakespeare suffering, like the heavenly elements, to return to the cross and the tea, is not entirely can't be entirely removed, even if it can be controlled for. And that's very interesting, the idea of a controlled dissonance, or the system finding a way to deal with the people who don't fit into it.
Yeah, I mean, in 1984 they just kill him, right? But even in that, though, I don't want to get too far into that book, but O'Brien still won't say whether or not what was that guy, Goldstein, won't say whether or not Goldstein exists. Like, there's still that hope that maybe there's someone out there, right, that's going to be fighting the system. So, I mean, it's out there for sure.
And I mean, X, a lot of your work is on people who don't really fit into systems, and how they give a different view on the systems that they live in, for better or for worse. And I'm interested to think what connections you might draw to that, just because it seems to be right in line with these figures who just don't quite fit the mold.
Yeah. You mentioned you referenced another book, which I can't quite name right now. It's escaping my memory. But you kind of mentioned how there's this people or person who had no reference or no, sort of grasp or appreciation of, art and literature and, cultural artifacts, things like that. And I really want to touch on that, right? Because a lot of the Brave New World dystopian tendencies, the elements of the book that makes it dystopian, I don't want to oversimplify it by saying it's a very material dystopian. It's like a very material cause, but for the purpose of this point that I'm trying to make, it is material, right? It's a drug that you're taking. It's genetic engineering that's happening. Whereas there's also another way to look at the problems of Brave New World, which is the more of the cultural aspects of it, right? I think later in the book they kind of reference like Shakespeare, like in Brave New World they kind of reference Shakespeare, and they do sort of have like an ambivalence to him, sort of like what even is this, right? They have no referential rootedness with their past cultural heritage, so to speak. And why do I find this so important? Because a lot of the figures that I focus on in my channel, they are people that lived through the depths of modernity, right? One of the figures that I focus on the most is a person named Ernst Jünger, right? He's a German writer, um, good friends with Heidegger, right? He's a famous philosopher. And just to give you a brief idea of all that he experienced, right? He lived for 100 years from the 1890s. I think he lived for 102 years. So, he lived through the Second and Third Reich, Weimar Germany, East and West Germany, and then lived for some years into the Germany that we now know today. And throughout his times, you can see a huge, staggering parallel with Aldous Huxley, because after the war, they both experiment with drugs, right? LSD, other psychedelics, things like that, and more in line with the book Brave New World. The books that Jünger wrote were very much dystopian in a way that expanded on the themes of Brave New World, right? I would even go so far as to say, books like Oimesville, right, which is Jünger's last major work. It's a dystopian novel set in like the next millennium, I believe, in some kind of unnamed African city state, and I remember reading it 3 years ago, and it was like, damn, like this book is like literally Brave New World but better. And why do I say it's better? Because the book Brave New World, it talks about a lot of complacency in general, but Jünger approaches it from a different perspective, right? Jünger talks about a political and aesthetic complacency, which Matt kind of referenced with like the grasp of literature, right? And so, you read books like The Glass Bees, which is another book, right? And The Glass Bees is very similar to Brave New World. In fact, the New York Times book review even wrote, it will remind you of authors like George Orwell or Aldous Huxley, due to his understanding of technology, because that's what Jünger really focused on before the war, in books like The Worker, for example. And I'll wrap up my point here, but the point is, the point is that the themes that are explored in Brave New World, if you like them, right? If you, and Matt, you mentioned, you're into the other dystopian novels, and for anyone that's want to explore other dystopian novels to sort of compare and contrast to our own world, I would highly recommend picking up a book by Jünger, right? Either The Glass Bees or Oimesville, and you will see that his writing style is very unique and distinct. It's very colorful and beautiful, because Jünger has a way of sort of seeking refuge in poetry in times of cultural lethargy, right, and cultural stagnation, when there is no good art, when there is no vibrant cultural, when there is no vibrant culture. He sort of steps into the timeless, steps outside of time in his writings, and you can see it. You can see that his writing is eternal, and that is what I think makes that books, just a bit more interesting than Brave New World. So if you're looking for other books, Jünger is the guy to go to.
I have never read Jünger, but that is fascinating, and you give a very good, you give a very convincing pitch for him. I'll say that.
Yeah, and there is a book that I suggested like some time ago, which is Zamyatin, and it's basically this like this type of story with dystopia. With actually, it's very very close to Brave New World about society structure, and I think that it covers more and covers deeply why this system of robbing you out of like all experience, because like Brave New World, it doesn't really covers like artistic expression or any like any form of expression, like artistic expression, like imaginary expression, but the Latin way, it does covers it. And I think I checked my notes earlier, and it's just like I can't recall if but I think it's from this book that this dude in the end, he went to this operation of removing imagination. And for me, as an artistic person, that itself sounds terrifying, because in many ways, the way I cope with uncomfortable situation is my imagination, and imagination has a lot of power, and it's something that if it's developed, it's going to be there with you, and it's something that helps you to evolve. And because we have imagination, we can create things, and if you don't create things, it's just like, I'm not going to live there. I don't want to subscribe to suffering, because I basically don't want to subscribe to suffering, but living without having opportunity to imagine, to dream, to create something is that doesn't work for me too.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, right? Like all of these references to books reminds me of like Nietzsche's concept of the last man, right? And which is the short end of it is that through this negation of life's experiences, right? So Ekaterina, you mentioned artistic and imaginative inclinations, right? I would even add in creative inclinations. They all kind of fit under the same category. Through the negation of that, for whatever reasons, through the negation of that, Nietzsche coined the term the last man to sort of describe a new class of people who are unable to sort of express themselves and create. Because you can read these books and say, wow, I would never want to live in a world like that where we negate what we find fulfilling. But if you think about it, right, maybe it's not right. I'm not gonna say it's not so bad, but let's think about it here for a second. Let's say you're starving, for example, and well, you could say the best thing to have when you're starving is your favorite food, right? Nothing's better than your favorite food when you're starving. However, maybe the better option is to never have been hungry at all, to never have been hungry in the first place, so that you don't even need to have that, so that your energy that you expend could be focused on somewhere else. And so maybe there is a discussion to be had here, is like, to what point is negation harmful or helpful to reach our ideals, right? This is essentially the crux of the whole anti-natalist argument, because this whole time we were talking about negating living life experiences that a person alive goes through. But then the anti-natalists take that a step further and says, okay, whoa. Why don't we just negate life itself and just say, well, okay, it's never to, right? The famous line is, to be or not to be it's better to never have been, right? That the negation of good and bad is better than having good but risking the bad. And I think as we live on through this century, right? And yeah, as we live on through this century, it's a question that we ought to ask as our world becomes more synthesized through technology and our general environment.
So that is, I've been thinking a little bit, because you raise a lot of very fascinating points. I mean, to be simple, I'm team people. I believe in humanity. I am team humanity, even though I often don't like many aspects of humanity at our worst. I do my best to be an optimist, because we can do so many good things. And I guess a question with suffering, with the various systems we can have, is what is it being used for? And this is really a question Huxley brings up in Brave New World Revisited as well, in terms of where is the human element in it? If you're just existing to alleviate suffering, just to have as little suffering as possible for no higher purpose, that isn't a satisfying world to me. And that's Brave New World. And that's not a goal that I'm going to strive for. But he brings up in this revisitation things like music, things like art, and how they have this power to tap us into something higher. Looking at music in a writing years later, the post advertisement era, right? Mass media. It is historically, music would be you're singing it in church because it's part of your praise. It's a hymn. It's to remember a mantra, to align your mind to some kind of value. Or your soldiers who are marching across the countryside, doing something to keep yourselves united in pace with each other. You're singing a national anthem, right? Something to unite you to something greater than you. And nowadays we listen to music like pop music, fun. There's always been pop music too. And we listen to jingles in commercials to, right? My car has a crack in the windshield. And if you sing Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace, they give you 10% off. And just by thinking of music, I just gave them an advertisement right now. These are very powerful forces that exist and that we need to be aware of. That we are humans, that there are things that we can be manipulated into, and that these can be used for something greater, to unite, to change the mind, to see new ways of the world, but that people who don't have something greater in mind are very well aware of them as well. Things like the education in sleep, the subliminal messages, and Huxley, for just a brief moment here before I open up, Huxley, in one of his last, if not his last thing that he wrote, was a book, The Island. I have not read it in full, though I have gone through a synopsis, where he intended it to be kind of this optimistic vision, where it takes place on this remote island in the Indian Ocean, fictional, but where Western medicine is used as a supplement to Eastern spiritual practices, because Huxley had been, he became very engrossed in the Vedic traditions, the Hindu traditions later in his life, in psychedelic drugs that he used to expand consciousness. These very similar tools to the ones that are used for ill in Brave New World, or at least used for what I, being team people and team non-industrial, like, I'm not going to say burn down the factories. I like having a place to live that's not a shack, but I think these can be used in a better way.
I think that's so you kind of made a commercial for great books, like that's why we read. That's why things that are older than us are important, because every society and every culture and every geographical group of people have had their own problems, but they've also had their own successes. They've had the things that they got right. And it almost goes without saying that it's always going to be a trade-off. You're going to have things that your culture and your society does really well, and then things that you're completely blind to. Like a couple, 200 years ago, people were like, "Oh yeah, slavery is fine," and we look at that, we're like, "Oh, it's crazy." But then if they saw the way that we like waste our time on the internet, and like the way that we just do a bunch of like really banal stuff, like they would be appalled by that, right? So we all have these blind spots, and I think a liberal arts education and reading great books and making sure that you're drawing from the deep well of the humanities really protects you from some of the drawbacks of your own place and time. And that's why I think it's great books education, humanities are really important. And Plato in the Republic quotes someone else, but he says, "Hard is the good," and I think that's really true. If something is worth having, it's not going to be easily accessible. So I think that does speak to art as well. The good stuff is it might take some time to grasp and to understand. It's really easy to understand Britney Spears, but it's a lot harder to understand Rachmaninoff.
And so I think that as we come to the close, I think we had a very interesting group for Brave New World. I really like it, and these different ideas we hit coming to this point of, well, in terms of my perspective, really giving traditional societies, stories, cultures, humans a chance and finding wisdom in them. Then in terms of exposing yourself with Matt to this education, to learning, to being able to understand what's great, and Katia using that to fuel an imagination no matter who you are, and then with X to make sure that no matter what it is, that you are raising yourself up to be as great as art can be. If anyone else has anything to add for a closing, but I think that's what I got out of this conversation, which I think stands on its own. Brave New World revisited by someone other than Huxley. But I think this was very fascinating. And if anyone else has anything else to add, or just give yourself a little plug, now is the time. Mythos and Logos, World Mythology and Religions. That's my project. So hopefully I'll see you there.
I'm TheExNonGrata. All the links will be in the description, but yeah, you can search me. You can find me there.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the time. You're a great moderator, Sean.
I agree. You're better than me.
I try.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sean. I'm glad my mic's still working. It was a great time. And you can find me as KatiaPavlovart on YouTube, and I also have like Instagram and TikTok. Yep, you just can find me there.
Great. Then in that case, to all y'all here, all y'all listening, whenever in the future this may be, if you just got out of your Bokanovskification tank and they're training you with this as propaganda because somehow we formed the world, who knows? Future's weird. But whoever you are, wherever, whenever you're listening, go out and have a wonderful rest of your day, you imaginative human.